Hi, Gemini. This is Tisch Aitken, and this is your monthly horoscope for the month of May. And you are definitely in the spotlight, although it's still very much a Saturn Capricorn year. You are currently in the spotlight because there are currently 4 points in Gemini at the moment. The nodes of fate have recently changed signs. So on May 5th, the nodes of fate exited the Capricorn Cancer axis and entered the Sagittarius Gemini axis. And the north node of destiny, where you're meant to go towards, is in your sign, and it's transiting in your first house of self and new beginnings through January 4th of 2022. So this is definitely a time of a lot of change, but a lot of new beginnings that you are moving towards in your life, and a lot of fated opportunities that will emerge. And secondly, Mercury, well, Mercury is about to exit. I'm filming this at the end of May, but Mercury is out of bounds until June 9th, and it's transiting in the month of June in your house of income and what you value. And it's out of bounds, meaning that it exceeds the sun's declination. And so just a lot of communication, a lot of activity, and a lot of mental activity, especially because Venus, which is the planet of love and beauty, is retrograding in your sign until the end of June. Venus retrogrades once every 18 months, and it retrogrades once every 8 months in your sign. And it's retrograding in your first house of self. Now, Gemini is a very social sign. It rules our primary years. It's, local activity, community, neighborhood stuff. It reminds me of grammar school, that kind of thing, people you knew in high school, well, grammar school, even younger than that. So it represents siblings and cousins, but it's commerce, sales, communication of all forms. And with Venus retrograde in your sign, which happens every 8 years in your first house, and the fact that it's out of bounds the entire time it's retrograde, it's out of bounds until July 1st. So it's going to be a lot of mental activity for you. It's actually very creative. It can be confusing. This whole Venus retrograde in particular is because when it's stationed retrograde, it did so with the square to Neptune, which is the higher octave of Venus, and very creative and very compassionate, but on the lower form can be duplicitous and can be confusing or spacey, in a more harmless way, just out to lunch. So, with this, tap into the creativity, tap into the love, recognize that things could be a bit confusing. Neptune's transiting in your house of career, and Mars is currently transiting there too in Pisces. So that could be a bit, where you feel that you're reviewing where you want to go towards and what your new 8-year story is about creating. And let's see here. The sun will be transiting in your first house until June 20th. And then it enters the sign of Cancer. Mercury is transiting in your second house of income. It's going to retrograde on June 18th, and it's going to reach as far as 14 degrees of Cancer, which is a cardinal water sign. And that's actually opposing the final eclipse we're having this summer, because the third eclipse is going to be at 13 degrees of Capricorn, and that takes place on July 5th. And Mercury stations retrograde on July 18th at 14 degrees of Cancer. So I imagine more information will surface early in July when we have our final eclipse. And for you, you're gathering a lot of information. You're doing a lot of networking. I think it's a good time to connect with people you worked with before if you're trying to find new options on choices to reinvent yourself in a way. This is really a good time in a sense with this retrograde to recreate yourself, and we're already in a time of permanent change and collapsing of old structures with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction. And for you, that fell in your in your 8th house of death and rebirth, and also joint resources and taxes and investments. So you might be rethinking that area of your life as well. But also, I think that it's about healing, and there's a Jupiter-Pluto conjunction that takes place at the end of the month. It's going to be on June 30th at 24 degrees of Capricorn. And that's where all that, Capricorn fell for you, was in the 8th house of intimacy and joint resources and death and rebirth. And so this is a time where you're restructuring your finances and perhaps your debt, but also doing a lot of self-healing. It's a very psychological house. That's the Scorpio house in astrology. And so that Jupiter-Pluto conjunction is only 2 degrees off from when Saturn and Pluto met up at the world axis on January 12th. And we had that historical alignment. We will never have that much Capricorn in the sky in your 8th house. And so this is a very transformative energy, very healing, excellent for business. A lot of people that are very successful in business have this conjunction. It is an aspect, it's a conjunction that millionaires have, or billionaires, or whatever you want to say. But aside from that, it's a very empowering conjunction, and it's a very healing one and transformative. And in the world we're in and in the year we've had, that's really critical. And so we're going to have a solar eclipse that takes place on the summer solstice, and that's also a really big deal. And that's falling in your second house of income and value, again, around how you earn money. And it's going to fall at 0 degrees of Cancer, but it's also the summer solstice. So that's the day that in the northern hemisphere, it's the longest day of the year, and the sun is at the highest point in the sky, and the sun slows down and stops for 3 days, and it's a beginning of a new season, and it's a lot of energy, and it's a very reflective time too, because as it stops, and then after that, the nights become longer and the days become shorter. But for that day, we have the longest day and a lot of light and bringing things to light. But we have that day a total solar eclipse, and that's a huge deal, because just as Saturn and Pluto met up at the world axis and changed the decade and the year and the world when they met up at 22 degrees of Cardinal, which is at Capricorn, and the 22 degrees, the cardinal signs are Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. 0 degrees of Cancer is also the world axis, and the north node of destiny is right there. It's out of sign, but it's 1 degree away at 29 degrees of Gemini. So you've got the north node in your first house of self and new beginnings, and you've got that new moon eclipse setting new intentions in your second house of money and income and what you value. And definitely as a Gemini, and all this Gemini energy right now, set your intentions, network, communicate, but say affirmations, write down what you want to manifest, and honor each of the eclipses. We do have a third and final eclipse that I'll talk more about, but that falls on July 5th. So it's technically not this month, but the fact that we're having 3 eclipses in 1 month is a huge, in 1 summer rather, is a huge deal. And Venus out of bounds, Venus retrograde, and in the fall, Mars is going to retrograde. And last but not least, Mars enters the sign of Aries on June 27th and enters your house of friends and groups. And it's going to be in Aries for the remainder of the year, because it's going to retrograde from September 9th through November 13th. So that's going to be where a lot of activity and action, a lot of networking, a lot of online activity, a lot of connecting, finding new groups or groups you're connecting with, probably reconnecting with people too during that retrograde period. But a lot of social activity, and I wish you a lot of good luck. All right. Thank you.